Welcome back to the Castos YouTube channel. Today we're going to take a look at setting up the perfect post for every single episode that you put out for your podcast, the perfect blog post or the perfect podcast post, whatever you want to refer to it as. I like to refer to it as a blog post. We use WordPress. This is WordPress, what you're looking at here today. It doesn't matter what platform you're using it on. Of course, if you're using WordPress, our plugin makes it a little bit easier for WordPress, but it doesn't matter if you're using Squarespace, Wix, your own homegrown website, Webflow. It doesn't matter as long as you're following some of these practices. Some of the stuff is design, which is subjective, and some of the stuff is structure on content. There's no exact science to this. You can create content however you want. It's what makes podcasting great. But the idea behind today's video is that you are creating some extension of your podcast episode. When people ask me, how do I grow the podcast? How do I get found? How do people search and find me? All that fun stuff. Creating an individual blog post associated with every podcast episode is really going to extend the chances that you're found. Not only from people sharing it, going into Facebook, going into LinkedIn, pasting a link to your episode, that kind of thing, but also for organic search. Search terms, keywords that are linked up in Google's index, people will be able to find your show. For example, if somebody were searching for the title of today, The Energy to Create Your Art with Espree Devora, or searching for specifically Espree Devora, chances are our article will get found, our interview will get found in Google once this gets indexed in Google. 50,000 foot view before we go into each individual post. Where a lot of creators miss out, or one major opportunity where creators miss out, podcast creators, is having a landing page for their podcast. Having one page, one URL that you can send somebody to that has all of your episodes, plus subscription links to follow these podcast episodes on the major platforms. So you can see right here, our landing page is castos.com/audience. When you get to this page, you can quickly follow these podcasts on Apple, Spotify, wherever. And then you can see the entire list of past episodes that we've done. And you get to see the nice featured image, bold, title, bold, and the podcast player right there. So you can quickly go into these episodes and listen to them. Or you can dive into one in a deeper context. So like this one right here, podcasting through the lens of Evo Terra, one of my more recent interviews. We'll click into that one. And now we'll go into the structure of this. So again, what we're doing is we're extending the experience of the podcast. So we put out our podcast, but now we're going to say, hey, by the way, there's some extra information on the website. You can get the links, you can get a summary, you can get important bullet points that were mentioned on the show. Again, this is important for people who want to extend the chances of being found through organic search, giving your podcast a home base on your website, which you absolutely should. One of the reasons why you're hosting at Castos is to own the content. Recently, Apple, Spotify, everyone's getting into the game of owning these private podcasts, but it's only going to be distributed on Apple. It's only going to be distributed on Spotify. We want to make sure that podcasting is open because it serves you, the creator, way better than it does an Apple or a Spotify. So we're extending those chances, but we're also giving our listener a chance to go back. I mean, how many times have you listened to a podcast where you're like, oh yeah, what was that thing that they mentioned? What was that book that they mentioned? You want to have a little resource kit for people to go back and grab that instead of having to listen to the entire episode all over again. So that's the other thing that we're doing is we're giving our listeners a better experience by writing out the show notes. This worked out just by chance here, but in this episode that I talked to Evo Terra, he's he got a podcast called Podcast Pontifications. He was the 40th podcast ever to be published on Apple. So he has a lot of thoughts on podcasting, of course. One of the things we talked about in this episode is how his podcast, which is made for podcasters, is read more than it's listened to, which is absolutely hilarious, but a testament to what we're talking about today. We're giving somebody something extra to go along with the show. And you might not be able to listen to an hour-long episode, but you will skim through the post, or you will find the most important bullet points or call to actions, which is what we're trying to do. We're trying to get that message home to you, the listener. Okay, let's get to the structure here. So here's the single post on our WordPress site. You can see right at the top of the page, it is, we are putting in the podcast player immediately, of course, because this is a podcast episode. That's the first thing we want people to do. We want people to listen to the podcast. Second is subscribing to the podcast. So making sure that our subscribe links are front and center, and they are right below our player. So if you're playing it, you're listening to it, you're going, oh, I love this, I want to subscribe to this on Google Podcasts, you can quickly click that link. I just hit my face against the microphone. 3 parts to the rest of this blog post for the podcast episode. The first third is a summary of the show. So what we like to do is write up a 3, 4, 5 paragraph summary of the show. Really depends on the length of the show. And we give folks a chance to summarize it and read it. Is this an episode that we want to listen to? We don't give away everything because obviously we want people to listen, but we give you a summary of what we talked about and the major call to actions. The second third of the post, what we like to do is put out little bullet points, real key takeaways that were mentioned in the show. So if you want to say, hey, did Evo talk about social audio and Clubhouse on the show? Oh, he did, right there, Evo's thoughts on social audio. So I know it's somewhere in this episode. I should definitely go listen to it. And then the final third of the post are the links. Any important links that were mentioned in the show. So things like Evo Terra's website, his Twitter handle, his podcast episodes, even one of the podcast episodes that we specifically talked about on the show that he did is linked up here, and then all of our links that are important to Castos. So we summarize the show, we give you some bullet points, and then we give you the important links. Generally, all of the resources you need to say, yeah, this is the episode I want to listen to, or if you're coming back to it, what was that thing that they said? What was that stat that they said? What was that book that they recommended? It should all be here in that post. And of course, this is on our Castos.com website, so the chances are that somebody will listen to this episode who wants to be a podcaster, and oh, by the way, we do podcasting here, right? So that's the wheel that we're connecting the dots on there. People can share it really easily using the links or starting a 14-day free trial with our hosting platform. So you can see how the major guardrails are put up here. We want either to share it, read it, listen to it, or sign up for our service. And that's largely how the podcast drives customers, retention, value, the ability to share episodes, and all of that fun stuff. So that's how we do our best podcast posts for every single episode. What do you do? Let us know in the comments below. How do you set up your blog posts for every podcast episode that goes out? By the way, if you're using Seriously Simple Podcasting, our plugin that connects up to our Castos hosting account, when you put this content in there, it's actually the same content that's going out to all of our podcast listening devices, our apps that we're listening to. This content goes out into whatever, Apple Podcast, Overcast, whatever you listen to podcasts in. So it's a nice little time saving right there if you're using our plugin connected up to your WordPress website. That's it. Thumbs up if you like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you want more. We'll see you in the next video.